Congratulations on choosing a product to sell. Throughout this module, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to find a source for your factory, and this is going to be where you're going to get your products manufactured. I'm not going to be covering where you can source products from for arbitrage or wholesale opportunities, but instead how to choose that perfect factory. If you're wondering how and where do I get my inventory, that's what we're going to be covering throughout this module. Throughout the different lessons, I'm going to be breaking down each step of the sourcing process from finding potential suppliers all the way to placing the order. Let's go over the process we'll follow to find a supplier. We'll start by searching for and contacting several potential suppliers. This could be suppliers that were advertising a very similar product to what we're looking to source, or suppliers who have experience with a certain material or process. Once we find a good list of suppliers, we'll contact each of them via email and start to vet each of these factories. This is your chance to outline what you're looking for in the product specifics, as well as ask questions around cost, production, capacity, or getting the samples. You can also ask them more about their business or anything else you would like to take into account to help you make your decision. I'll give you a great template to get you started with some of the basic questions in this lesson. Once the suppliers start responding to your inquiries, you can start gathering their responses and compare them against each other. We're not only looking for the best price, but also a factory that's easy to work with and is producing a high quality product. We have some awesome quote features built right into Jungle Scout called the Supplier Tracker that will really help you make this process easy and stay organized throughout. Once we've decided on some of the top factories, we're going to be ordering samples to determine the quality of their goods, as well as how easy they are to work with. Throughout the vetting process, you'll likely go back and forth quite a few times with the supplier discussing modifications or packaging or getting the final price. And then once you've agreed on all these details, we'll submit a purchase order and put down a deposit so they start manufacturing our goods. We'll also cover topics like inspections and contracts and different options for paying for your goods. In the next lesson, we'll discuss what to look for in a good supplier and where to find one. This is where it really starts to get fun, and I'll see you there. By the end of this lesson, you'll know exactly what it is that makes a good factory. Over the years, I've worked with dozens and dozens of different factories, and I've learned a lot throughout that process. There's a big difference from the factory that's a perfect fit for you versus one that's not as high of quality or just not a good match for your particular business. We're looking for a few key things in a supplier. Some of these are important now in this phase where we are seeking suppliers out, and some are more important when we get to the stage of comparing all the suppliers we contact against each other. My preferred method of finding suppliers is using the supplier database right inside of Jungle Scout. We've created the database using US custom records along with other data points and sources to make sourcing easier and more efficient. This was created out of the pain point of working with factories that we found on marketplaces like Alibaba or Global Sources, and while you can still use those to supplement your supplier search, our customers generally find that it's much easier to find high quality factories using the supplier database inside of Jungle Scout. I'll break down the entire supplier database and how to best use it in the next video, but just real quickly, I did a search for battery cable, another name for inverter cables, which we spoke about last module. And what I can see here are different factories that make these inverter cables or battery cables. If I expand it, I start to see all these different shipments. And what's really cool is I can see what this factory has been shipping to customers in the US. It looks like CarQuest Auto Parts is actually one of their customers, and you can see that that's where they're buying their battery cables or inverter cables. The overall goal here is to find a good fit between you and the supplier. I didn't quite understand this until I had the opportunity to go to China and visit a whole bunch of factories, but what I learned is some were really big, and it makes sense that they would only have these really big customers that were placing orders for tens of thousands of units. I've then visited other factories, and some of these were much smaller, and it made sense that they'd be willing to do production runs of 500 or 1,000 units. There's not necessarily just a good and a bad factory, but instead a factory that meets the needs of your business. When you're looking to locate these suppliers or pre-vet them, one of the things that you can look at is the number of shipments per year. The example we just looked at there had hundreds of shipments per year, so it makes sense they had these really big customers like CarQuest. Instead, for small businesses, which I imagine yours is, you'd want to look for factories that do 5 or 10 or maybe 20 shipments per year, which would indicate they're a little bit of a smaller factory and willing to work with small businesses and entrepreneurs. Let's now go over some of the top characteristics that we'll be looking for in a factory. The first one probably goes without saying, but you're looking for a factory that can produce a high quality product. On Amazon, lots of our customers are buying based off of the reviews, so a low quality product is going to get bad reviews and therefore be hard for you to sell. What I've found over the years is the quality can differ quite a lot from factory to factory. To ensure the highest quality, one of the top things you'll want to do is be very clear when you're requesting a quote or a sample about what you expect with your product. An example of this is when I was getting my hooded baby towels manufactured, instead of just saying something like, hey, I want this to be a high quality fabric, I gave specifics about the fabric. I didn't know this before, but it turns out that a thickness gauge or a weight gauge of fabrics is GSM or grams per square meter, and this is a way to gauge the thickness of a fabric. I told them specifically that I wanted 350 GSM, which means it was a high quality, thick fabric. The more specifics that you can give your factory, the more likely that they're going to produce something that meets your expectations. The next thing we can do to vet our factory for a quality product is getting a sample from them and a few other factories. Now, this helps you gauge the quality of the factory, but we do also have to keep in mind that whenever a factory is going to send you a sample, of course it's going to be a higher quality, or of course they're going to give it a little extra polish and love before they send it to you. Another good way to gauge the quality of the products that the factory is producing is to see which countries or regions of the world they're exporting their goods to. What I've found is factories that are typically exporting their goods to the Middle East or Southeast Asia or Africa have different quality standards than what their customers expect when they export them to the EU or North America. The last way to gauge the quality of the goods is to see what kind of reviews the end customer is actually leaving for these products. Now, of course, the factory is going to tell you that they have high quality goods, and oftentimes the samples might be the highest quality one they can produce. But at the end of the day, it's up to the end customer to decide the quality of the products. In a future lesson, I'm going to be showing you how you can link up the customers of these factories so you can see what kind of reviews they're getting on online marketplaces. The next characteristic we're going to look for in a factory is their experience. We want a factory who has been producing this type of product for a certain period of time. This is pretty easy to check by viewing their import history right inside of the supplier database. We'll also want a supplier that specializes in this type of product, and we can gauge that based off of the description of the imports, as well as the pie chart inside of the supplier database, which tells us the type of goods that they're producing based off of the HS code. Through my experience of visiting factories, what I quickly learned is there's lots of different types of factories, and different factories specialize in different types of goods. For example, if I went to visit an umbrella factory, the types of goods that they're making are usually just umbrellas. Sure, they might be rain umbrellas and sun umbrellas, or maybe those umbrella hats, but they're all umbrella type products. It would be very rare for a factory to produce, say, umbrellas and electronics, or ceramic goods and plastic goods. We'll want to find a factory that has experience manufacturing our type of product. With the supplier database, we can also gauge the length of time that they've been in business and the number of shipments they ship each year, and use these to gauge the overall experience of our factory. The next characteristic we're looking for in a factory is good communication skills. It's likely that the factory you find will be in a country where their native language is not the same as yours. As a result, there's almost always a little bit of a language barrier. However, you are going to need to communicate well enough to make sure that you can get all your points across and you understand their responses. If you can't communicate well with your factory, it's unlikely you're going to be able to communicate a great product. One thing to take notice of is how they speak about their products and if they're able to provide you with answers to all your questions. After your first communication with them, you'll be able to gauge their English skills, and right away, you'll get a good feeling whether or not they'll be easy to communicate with. The last characteristic we're looking for in a factory is a good price. Of course, you're in this business to make some money, and you should expect a fair price from your factory. If the supplier quotes you a price that is much higher or much lower than the other factories you're speaking with, that's a red flag. If the price is really low compared to the other quotes, make sure they're clear about the product specifications and that you're getting the same thing as what the other suppliers assume you are. If the price is really high compared to the other quotes, it may signal that they're trying to overcharge you. This is why it's a good idea to get several quotes from several different factories, because without doing so, it's hard to gauge what the price of these goods should be. There's no need to write off factories right away that quote you something really high or really low, because all of these prices are negotiable, and with a little bit of back and forth, you should be able to clear up any misunderstandings around what they're supposed to produce. Oftentimes, I see beginners get caught in the trap of all they want is the very lowest price. And at the end of the day, there's more things that are important when working with a factory than just the price. To recap, the top things that we're looking for in a supplier is the quality, their experience, their ability to communicate well, and the price. All these together will determine which supplier is the best fit for you and your business. You can, of course, look for suppliers on other websites like Alibaba or Google or wherever else, but our preferred method for finding suppliers is the Jungle Scout supplier database. Because of that, I'll dive deep into it in the next lesson, and I'll see you in there.